The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of the Hindu Kush Mountains in Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez adjusted her gear one final time before stepping out of the armored vehicle. At barely 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighing just 125 pounds, she looked almost childlike against the massive military equipment surrounding her. Her fellow soldiers often joked that she could hide behind a lamp post, but none of them doubted her capabilities anymore. Maria had been deployed to this remote outpost for 6 months now, serving as a combat medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment. The daughter of Mexican immigrants who had worked multiple jobs to put her through nursing school, she had joined the military to serve her country and gain experience in emergency medicine. What she hadn't expected was to find herself in some of the most dangerous territory on Earth, where every patrol could mean the difference between life and death. The mission briefing that morning had been routine. Intelligence suggested that a high-value target was hiding in a village about 12 miles north of their base. The plan was simple: insert a small team via helicopter, conduct reconnaissance, and extract before dawn the next day. It was the kind of operation they had done dozens of times before, but Maria always felt the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach before heading out. Lieutenant Jake Harrison, the team leader, was a seasoned Navy SEAL who had been deployed to Afghanistan multiple times. Standing 6 feet 3 inches tall with broad shoulders and arms like tree trunks, he was everything Maria was not in terms of physical presence. Yet over the months they had worked together, he had come to respect her medical skills and unwavering determination. She had already saved 3 lives during their previous missions, working under fire with steady hands and calm focus that impressed even the most experienced operators. The helicopter ride to the insertion point was bumpy, the aircraft shaking violently as it navigated between mountain peaks to avoid detection. Maria checked her medical supplies one more time, ensuring that her trauma kit was properly secured and easily accessible. She carried more medical equipment than most medics, knowing that in these remote areas, she might be the only medical care available for hours or even days. As they approached the landing zone, the pilot's voice crackled over the radio. The weather was deteriorating faster than expected, with heavy clouds rolling in from the west. They would have to move quickly to avoid getting caught in a storm that could ground their extraction helicopter. The team of 8 soldiers prepared to rappel down to the rocky outcrop that would serve as their starting point. The descent went smoothly, and within minutes they were on the ground, moving silently through the rugged terrain toward their objective. Maria stayed in the middle of the formation, her eyes constantly scanning for potential casualties while also watching for threats. The mountains seemed peaceful in the early morning light, but she knew that danger could emerge from any shadow or rocky outcrop. 3 hours into their patrol, they reached an observation point overlooking the target village. Through their scopes, they could see normal daily activity: children playing in the dusty streets, women hanging laundry, men gathered around a small shop drinking tea. It looked like any other rural Afghan village, but intelligence indicated that their target was hiding somewhere among those seemingly innocent buildings. Lieutenant Harrison made the decision to move closer, positioning the team on a ridge that would give them better visibility while maintaining their concealment. Maria found a position behind a large boulder where she could observe the entire team while staying protected from potential sniper fire. Her medical training had taught her to always think about casualty evacuation routes, and she mentally mapped the terrain, identifying the best paths to reach any injured team member quickly. The village remained quiet throughout the morning, with no signs of the suspicious activity they had been briefed to watch for. By noon, the temperature had risen significantly, and the team was consuming water at a concerning rate. Maria made a note to monitor everyone for signs of heat exhaustion, knowing that dehydration could be just as dangerous as enemy fire in this environment. It was just after 2 in the afternoon when everything changed. A single gunshot echoed across the valley, followed immediately by the distinctive crack of a sniper rifle. Lieutenant Harrison dropped to the ground, blood spreading rapidly across his uniform. Maria's training took over instantly, and she was moving before the second shot rang out. Man down, she called into her radio as she crawled rapidly across the rocky ground toward Harrison's position. Bullets whistled overhead as the rest of the team returned fire, trying to locate the shooter's position while providing cover for their medic. Maria reached the lieutenant and quickly assessed his wounds. The bullet had entered his left thigh, likely hitting the femoral artery based on the amount of blood loss. Working with practiced efficiency, She applied a tourniquet above the wound site while keeping her body low to avoid the continuing sniper fire. Harrison was conscious, but losing blood rapidly. She started an IV line and began pushing fluids while simultaneously calling for immediate evacuation. The radio response was not what she wanted to hear. The weather had deteriorated significantly, and no aircraft could reach them for at least 6 hours. The firefight intensified as more enemy fighters appeared to be moving into positions around their observation point. The team's sergeant made the tactical decision that they needed to move to a more defensible position, but Harrison was in no condition to walk. The nearest suitable location was a rocky outcrop about 2 miles away, accessible only by traversing extremely difficult terrain. Maria looked at Harrison, then at the treacherous mountain path ahead. At 125 pounds, she weighed less than half what the lieutenant did, but she knew that moving him was their only option for survival. She had trained for situations like this, but the reality of carrying a wounded soldier twice her size across miles of mountain terrain seemed almost impossible. The team provided covering fire as Maria prepared Harrison for movement. She administered pain medication and secured all his equipment to prevent it from catching on rocks during transport. Using techniques she had practiced countless times in training, she positioned herself to carry him in a fireman's carry, distributing his weight across her shoulders and back. The first 100 yards were the hardest. Maria's legs trembled under the combined weight, and she had to stop frequently to adjust her grip and catch her breath. Harrison remained conscious, but was growing weaker from blood loss despite her medical interventions. The other team members wanted to help, but they needed to maintain security and watch for pursuing enemy forces. As they moved across the mountainous terrain, Maria discovered reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. Her body adapted to the rhythm of carrying the wounded seal, finding efficient ways to navigate the rocky paths while maintaining her balance. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate to avoid further injury to Harrison or exhaustion that could leave them both vulnerable. The first mile took nearly 2 hours to complete. Maria's uniform was soaked with sweat, and her shoulders ached from the constant pressure of Harrison's weight. But she refused all offers from teammates to take over, knowing that switching carriers would waste precious time and potentially worsen Harrison's condition. She had committed to getting him to safety, and her determination only grew stronger with each difficult step. As the afternoon wore on, the enemy pursuit seemed to fade, but new challenges emerged. The weather was indeed deteriorating, with strong winds and the first drops of rain beginning to fall. The rocky terrain was becoming more treacherous, and Maria knew that a single slip could be fatal for both of them. She adjusted her pace, moving more carefully but never stopping for more than a few seconds at a time. By the time they reached the 2-mile mark, Harrison had lost consciousness, which was both concerning and helpful. Maria could move more efficiently without having to coordinate with him, but his lack of responsiveness indicated that his condition was worsening. She checked his pulse frequently and continued to monitor the tourniquet, knowing that his life depended on her medical care as much as her physical ability to carry him to safety. The team's new defensive position was finally visible ahead, a rocky outcrop that would provide shelter from both the weather and any remaining enemy forces. But Maria realized that their ordeal was far from over. The helicopter evacuation had been delayed even further due to the storm, and they might have to hold this position for many hours before medical help could arrive. She would need to continue providing advanced medical care while potentially defending their position if the enemy returned. As they finally reached the temporary safety of the rocky shelter, Maria carefully lowered Harrison to the ground and immediately began reassessing his wounds. The journey had taken nearly 4 hours, during which she had carried a man twice her size across some of the most challenging terrain on Earth. But her work was just beginning. She would need to stabilize him for what could be a very long night in the mountains, with limited supplies and no guarantee of when help would arrive. The rocky shelter provided minimal protection from the worsening storm, but it was defensible and offered concealment from any enemy forces that might still be pursuing them. Maria immediately went to work setting up a makeshift medical station, using her pack and available rocks to create a sterile workspace. Lieutenant Harrison remained unconscious, his breathing shallow but steady. She knew that the next few hours would be critical to his survival. Working by the light of a filtered flashlight, Maria removed the tourniquet temporarily to check circulation in Harrison's leg. The bleeding had slowed significantly, but the wound needed proper cleaning and dressing to prevent infection. She used her limited supply of saline solution to irrigate the bullet wound, working carefully to remove dirt and debris that had accumulated during their movement across the mountain terrain. The storm was intensifying, with heavy rain now falling steadily and lightning illuminating the jagged mountain peaks around them. The team's sergeant, Mike Rodriguez, established a defensive perimeter while staying close enough to assist Maria if needed. The other team members took positions among the rocks, watching for any signs of enemy movement through the darkness and rain. Harrison stirred as Maria worked on his wound, his eyes opening briefly before closing again. She checked his pulse and blood pressure, noting that while both were low, they had stabilized somewhat since their arrival at the shelter. The IV fluids were helping to maintain his blood volume, but she was concerned about potential internal bleeding that she couldn't detect or treat with her limited equipment. "How's he doing, Doc?" Rodriguez whispered, using the nickname the team had given Maria despite her being a medic rather than a doctor. She appreciated the confidence it implied, even though she sometimes felt the weight of their expectations. "He's stable for now, but he needs surgery soon," Maria replied quietly. "The bullet may have caused more damage than I can see. We need that helicopter as soon as possible." She continued working as she spoke, applying fresh dressings and adjusting his position to keep pressure off the wound while maintaining proper circulation. The radio crackled with an update from their base. The storm was expected to continue for several more hours, making helicopter operations impossible until dawn at the earliest. Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold mountain air. Harrison might not have that long, especially if complications developed that she couldn't handle with field equipment. Around midnight, Harrison's condition began to deteriorate. His breathing became more labored, and his skin felt clammy despite the cold temperature. Maria suspected he might be developing shock from continued blood loss or possibly an infection from the wound. She administered antibiotics from her medical kit and increased his IV fluid rate, but she knew these were only temporary measures. "We might have to consider moving him again," she told Rodriguez during a brief consultation away from Harrison's position. "If his condition gets worse, we may need to find a way to get him closer to where a helicopter can land, storm or no storm." Rodriguez looked at the Petite medic with amazement. She had already carried Harrison 4 miles across impossible terrain, and now she was suggesting they might need to do it again. "Maria, you've already done more than anyone could expect. If we have to move him, we'll figure out a way to share the load." But Maria shook her head. "Moving him between carriers increases the risk of further injury. If we have to go, I can handle it. I just need to prepare him properly and plan our route." She had already been studying the terrain visible through their night vision equipment, mapping potential paths to lower elevations where helicopter landing might be possible despite the weather. At 2 in the morning, Harrison took a turn for the worse. His pulse became rapid and thready, and his breathing grew increasingly shallow. Maria recognized the signs of developing shock and knew that without immediate surgical intervention, they might lose him. She made the difficult decision that they needed to move toward a potential helicopter landing zone, regardless of the risks. The team prepared for movement in the storm, with each member understanding the gravity of their situation. Maria rechecked all of Harrison's medical equipment, ensuring that his IV lines were secure and that she could continue monitoring his vital signs during transport. She redistributed weight in her pack, keeping only the most essential medical supplies and passing everything else to her teammates. The journey through the storm was like moving through a nightmare. Rain fell in torrents, making the rocks slippery and treacherous. Lightning provided brief moments of visibility, but often revealed terrain that seemed impossible to navigate while carrying an injured man. Maria's boots struggled for traction on the wet rocks, and several times she nearly lost her footing with Harrison's weight on her shoulders. Despite the conditions, Maria maintained a steady pace, stopping only when absolutely necessary to check Harrison's condition and adjust her grip. Her teammates stayed close, ready to help if she fell, but also maintaining the security formation they needed in case enemy forces were still in the area. The combination of physical exhaustion, stress, and extreme weather conditions pushed everyone to their limits. 3 hours into their night movement, they reached a more open area that might be suitable for helicopter operations once the weather cleared. Maria was approaching complete physical exhaustion, having now carried Harrison more than 7 miles across mountain terrain under the most difficult conditions imaginable. Her shoulders felt like they were on fire, and her legs trembled with each step, but she continued moving with determination that impressed even the most hardened soldiers on the team. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to weaken. Radio contact with their base revealed that helicopter evacuation would be possible within the hour if they could reach a specific landing zone another mile away. Maria looked at the terrain ahead, calculating whether she had enough strength left to complete what would be the most challenging portion of their journey. The final mile included a steep descent down a rocky slope, followed by a climb up to a relatively flat plateau where helicopters could land safely. Under normal conditions, it would be a difficult hike for anyone. Carrying an injured soldier after already traveling 7 miles through a mountain storm seemed almost impossible, even for someone with Maria's determination. Harrison regained consciousness briefly as they prepared for the final push. His eyes met Maria's, and despite his weakened condition, he seemed to understand what she had been doing for him. "You don't. You can't," he whispered, trying to speak through his pain and exhaustion. "Save your strength, Lieutenant," Maria replied firmly. "We're almost there, just hold on a little longer." She administered another dose of pain medication and checked his IV one more time. His pulse was still weak, but he had survived the night, which was more than she had dared hope for during the worst moments of the storm. The descent was the most dangerous part of their entire journey. Maria had to move slowly and carefully, testing each foothold before committing her weight and Harrison's to it. One slip could send them both tumbling down the rocky slope, potentially killing them both. Her teammates positioned themselves to provide what assistance they could, but ultimately, the responsibility rested entirely on Maria's shoulders. Halfway down the slope, Maria's right foot slipped on a wet rock, and for a terrifying moment she thought they were going to fall. She managed to regain her balance by dropping to one knee and using her free hand to steady herself against the rock face. The sudden movement caused Harrison to groan in pain, but he remained secured on her back. After taking a few seconds to catch her breath and calm her racing heart, Maria continued the descent with even greater caution. The climb up to the landing zone tested every remaining ounce of Maria's strength. Her legs felt like lead weights, and each step required tremendous effort. She could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching, which gave her the final motivation she needed to complete the journey. The medical evacuation team would be able to provide Harrison with the advanced care he needed, but only if she could get him to that landing zone. As they crested the final ridge, the helicopter landing zone came into view. It was a rough plateau about the size of a football field, cleared of large rocks and suitable for helicopter operations. Maria could see the aircraft in the distance, approaching rapidly through the morning sky. She had done it. After carrying Lieutenant Harrison more than 8 miles across some of the most challenging terrain on Earth, through enemy fire and a mountain storm, she had brought him to safety. The helicopter touched down just as Maria reached the edge of the landing zone. The medical team rushed forward with a stretcher, taking Harrison from her shoulders for the first time in over 12 hours. As they loaded him into the aircraft, Maria finally allowed herself to collapse to her knees, her strength completely exhausted but her mission accomplished. The crew chief helped Maria into the helicopter, where she continued providing medical care during the flight back to base. She monitored Harrison's vital signs and briefed the flight medics on all the treatments she had administered during their ordeal. Even in her exhausted state, she remained focused on her patient until they reached the military hospital where surgeons would take over his care. The military hospital at Bagram Airfield was a stark contrast to the rugged mountains Maria had just left behind. Bright fluorescent lights, sterile white walls, and the familiar smell of antiseptic created an environment where modern medical miracles happened daily. As the helicopter landed on the hospital's helipad, a full trauma team was waiting to receive Lieutenant Harrison. Maria refused to leave Harrison's side until he was wheeled into the operating room. Despite her exhaustion, she provided a detailed medical briefing to the surgical team, describing every treatment she had administered during their harrowing journey. The trauma surgeon, a veteran of many deployments, listened with growing amazement as she recounted the field care she had provided under impossible conditions. "You probably saved his life 3 times over," the surgeon told Maria as Harrison disappeared through the operating room doors. "The tourniquets, the fluid resuscitation, and getting him here this quickly, any one of those decisions could have made the difference between life and death. You should be proud of what you accomplished out there." Maria finally allowed herself to be examined by the medical staff. She had sustained numerous cuts and bruises during the journey, and her shoulders showed deep impressions from carrying Harrison's weight for so many miles. X-rays revealed no broken bones, but her muscles were severely strained from the extraordinary physical effort. The medical team wanted to keep her for observation, but Maria insisted on staying in the hospital until she knew Harrison's condition. News of Maria's heroic actions spread quickly through the military community. Within hours, soldiers throughout the base were talking about the small medic who had carried a Navy SEAL 8 miles through enemy territory and mountain storms. Many found it difficult to believe that someone of Maria's size could accomplish such a feat, but the witnesses from her team confirmed every detail of the incredible journey. The surgery on Harrison's leg took nearly 6 hours. The bullet had indeed caused significant damage to blood vessels and muscle tissue, but the rapid medical intervention Maria had provided in the field had prevented permanent disability. The surgeon later explained that without the immediate tourniquet application and continued medical care during transport, Harrison would have died from blood loss within the first hour after being shot. When Harrison finally awakened in the recovery room, his first question was about Maria. The nurses told him that she had remained in the hospital waiting room despite orders to rest, refusing to leave until she knew he would survive. When they were finally allowed to see each other, Harrison struggled to find words to express his gratitude to the woman who had literally carried him to safety. "I don't understand how you did it," Harrison said, his voice still weak from surgery and anesthesia. "I weigh almost twice what you do. How did you carry me 8 miles through those mountains?" Maria smiled, her exhaustion evident but her satisfaction clear. "I just took it one step at a time, Lieutenant. That's what we do. We don't leave anyone behind." Her simple explanation belied the extraordinary determination and physical courage she had demonstrated, but it perfectly captured the spirit that had driven her to accomplish the impossible. The investigation into their mission revealed that they had been ambushed by a well-organized enemy force that had been tracking their movements since insertion. The quick thinking and tactical decisions made by the team, combined with Maria's medical expertise and physical endurance, had prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of life. Intelligence officers noted that the enemy had significantly underestimated the American team's capabilities, particularly the small female medic they probably never expected to pose a threat. Within a week, Maria was back on duty, though military medical staff recommended she take extended leave to recover from her ordeal. She refused, stating that her team needed her and that there were other soldiers who might require her medical skills. Her dedication to service impressed everyone who met her, from the highest-ranking officers to the newest recruits arriving in theater. The story of Maria's heroism reached beyond the military community when a war correspondent heard about her actions and requested an interview. Initially reluctant to speak with the media, Maria eventually agreed to share her story in hopes that it might inspire other women considering military service. She wanted people to understand that heroism wasn't about size or strength, but about determination and refusing to give up when lives were at stake. During the interview, Maria downplayed her actions, consistently redirecting attention to her team's collective efforts and Harrison's courage in fighting to survive his wounds. She spoke about her background as the daughter of immigrants who had worked multiple jobs to support their family, and how that experience had taught her that anything was possible with enough determination and hard work. "My parents always told me that being small didn't mean being weak," Maria explained to the reporter. "They taught me that if you want something badly enough and you're willing to work for it, you can accomplish things that other people think are impossible. I just applied that lesson to carrying Lieutenant Harrison out of those mountains." The story gained national attention when it was published, making Maria a symbol of courage and determination for women serving in combat roles. She received hundreds of letters from young women expressing interest in military service, inspired by her example. Military recruiting offices reported increased interest from women, specifically mentioning Maria's story as motivation for their decision to enlist. Harrison made a complete recovery, returning to active duty within 3 months of his injury. He insisted on being assigned to the same unit as Maria, stating that he wanted to serve alongside someone he knew would never leave him behind if he was wounded again. Their professional relationship evolved into a deep friendship based on mutual respect and the shared experience of their mountain ordeal. Maria was awarded the Silver Star for her actions, becoming one of the few women to receive such a high military decoration for valor in combat. The citation praised her extraordinary heroism and selfless service above and beyond the call of duty, and noted that her actions had saved the life of a fellow service member under the most challenging conditions imaginable. At the medal ceremony, Maria's parents flew in from their home in Texas to watch their daughter receive recognition for her heroic actions. Her father, a construction worker who had served briefly in the Army decades earlier, wept openly as he watched his daughter being honored by military leaders. Her mother, who had initially opposed Maria's decision to join the military, now spoke proudly about her daughter's service and accomplishments. The ceremony was attended by hundreds of soldiers, including many who had served with Maria during her deployment. Harrison, walking with only a slight limp that served as the only visible reminder of his injuries, stood at attention as the citation was read aloud. When Maria was called forward to receive her medal, the entire assembly erupted in sustained applause that continued for several minutes. In her acceptance speech, Maria thanked her team, her family, and the military medical personnel who had taught her the skills she used to save Harrison's life. She dedicated the award to all the men and women serving in harm's way, stating that every one of them would have done exactly what she did if placed in the same situation. After her deployment ended, Maria was offered several prestigious assignments, including positions at military medical schools and advanced trauma centers. However, she chose to return to serving with frontline combat units, believing that her skills and experience could save more lives in the field than behind a desk or in a classroom. Years later, Maria continued serving as a combat medic, participating in numerous missions and training countless new medics in the life-saving techniques she had perfected during her service. She never spoke publicly about her heroic actions again, preferring to let her continued service speak for itself. When asked by new soldiers about the events that made her famous, she would simply say that she had done her job and that any good soldier would have done the same. Harrison eventually reached the rank of Master Chief Petty Officer and served multiple combat deployments before retiring from the Navy. He maintained contact with Maria throughout their careers, and they often spoke about the night in the mountains that had changed both of their lives. He credited her with not only saving his physical life, but with teaching him important lessons about courage, determination, and the power of refusing to give up when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. The impact of Maria's actions extended far beyond that single night in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Her story became part of military training programs, used to teach soldiers about the importance of physical fitness, medical training, and mental toughness. It demonstrated that heroism could come from unexpected sources, and that the most important qualifications for saving lives were determination and refusing to abandon fellow soldiers in need. Maria's legacy inspired changes in military policies regarding women in combat roles and contributed to increased recognition of the vital contributions made by medics and other support personnel. Her example proved that physical size and strength, while important, were not the only factors determining effectiveness in combat situations. Intelligence, training, determination, and unwavering commitment to fellow service members could overcome seemingly insurmountable physical challenges. Today, Maria's story continues to inspire new generations of military personnel and civilians alike. It serves as a reminder that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when motivated by duty, courage, and love for their fellow human beings. Her 8-mile journey through the mountains of Afghanistan, carrying a wounded comrade to safety under impossible conditions, stands as one of the most remarkable examples of heroism and determination in modern military history. The small woman who was initially underestimated by both allies and enemies had proven that true strength comes not from physical size, but from an indomitable spirit that refuses to give up when lives hang in the balance. Her actions that night saved not only Lieutenant Harrison's life, but also demonstrated the incredible potential that exists within every person willing to push beyond their perceived limitations in service of others.